How do you write an interesting character? Stories without interesting characters are like watches without any cogs inside, or even any hands, or anything, really. Really, the watch isn't there at all, it simply doesn't work. Interesting characters are the reason why people read in the first place, because they want to read about people they relate to. If the characters are shallow, cardboard cutouts who have been copied 1,000 times over, well, the story will be about as interesting as a bag of sand. I believe there are 3 elements that make an interesting character. 3 things that are the backbone of any character which will stay in the memory of the reader for longer than, say, the time it takes to brush your teeth. So without wasting any more time, the first element which a character must possess is internal conflict. Every human being that has ever lived has been plagued with a plethora of needs and wants. A need is simply defined as the thing the person needs the most in their life. This might be food or water. It may be a certain relationship, or it may be to overcome some bad habit. A want, on the other hand, is just that, something they desire but don't need, at least not to the same extent as their true need. This might be a promotion at work. It may be to go travelling or to gamble. It is this want which will inevitably distract them from their true need and thus cause inner conflict. For example, in Harry Potter, at the start of Severus Snape's life, he wants to follow the dark arts, but what he needs to do is focus on his friendship with Lily instead. When he becomes a teacher, he wants to bully Harry, but what he needs to do is let go of his resentment towards Harry's dad, who bullied him when he was at school. But Snape has a positive character arc. This means that while for most of his life he has prioritised his wants, by the end of his life he puts aside those desires and does what he needs to do instead, which is to risk his life protecting Harry. Equally, you can give a character a negative character arc, where the character starts off prioritising his needs and then goes on to prioritise his wants instead. The key though is that for every character you write, you need to have at least one clearly defined want and one clearly defined need to be the source of the character's internal conflict. Once you've established a strong need and want, the second element is external conflict. Now, 99% of the time, the more external problems your character has, the better. There is an irrational fear among writers that giving your characters too many problems is unrealistic or confusing to the reader. In reality, it simply makes your character more interesting. There are 2 main reasons for this. The first is that the more problems the character has, the easier it actually is to give the character contrasting needs and wants. After all, a conflicted external world is usually a reflection of a conflicted internal one. The second reason is because I liken a good story to a game of chess. At any one time, your character or your chess piece is facing several different threats from different directions, and this is, I believe, what makes reading so fun. And it also makes chess fun. It's the process of trying to work out how the character could possibly get out of that situation alive. Now, Stephen King is amazing at this because he writes in this way. He starts not with the characters themselves, i.e. the internal conflict, but he starts by thinking of a problematic situation, i.e. the external conflict, and then, only then, he puts the characters in the situation and basically lets them work out how to get out of it. The last element is to make your character vulnerable. Think about all the most interesting characters that you've read about. Chances are that every single one of them had at least one scene in which they were deeply vulnerable, whether they expressed anger or sadness or even joy. Most people have not just one, but many different wants and needs. As a result, any kind of external event can cause a cascade of responses depending on what those wants and needs are. In other words, we are a lovely, colourful rainbow of emotions. This is precisely why characters like Sauron or Prince Charming are uninteresting. They are only known for one thing. In Sauron's case, he is known for being evil, that's about it. In Prince Charming's case, he's really just a symbol of bravery, that's all he really is. That's why vulnerability is so important, because without it, you never truly get to see what the character is like. or to see the different layers of emotion that are always going to be beneath the surface. This is why Han Solo is such an iconic character. At the start he would seem like a very simple character, all he really wants is to get rich and to work alone. But then he meets Luke and Leia and Obi-Wan and he has to choose between his own wants and their needs. He's forced to be vulnerable, and so as the viewer we can actually see the conflict he is going through. The best way to express vulnerability is through the concept of show, don't tell. For a long time I didn't even know what this piece of advice meant. A lot of people said you just have to show and you don't tell, and I was like, what does that mean? It basically just means that every emotion a character has should be expressed either through what they do, what they say, or what they think. It really is as simple as that. For example, instead of saying Jack was scared, which would be telling, you should instead say Jack's eyes went wide, or Jack felt goose flesh creeping up his arms. Even Jack saying I'm scared is better than simply saying Jack was scared. So basically, if your character isn't doing it, saying it, or thinking it, then you're probably telling it instead of showing it. So just to sum up, the three essential elements to creating an interesting character are to give them internal conflict by establishing a clear need and a clear want. Then it is to create a bunch of external conflict which will make it a lot easier to create internal conflict. And finally it is to show that conflict through vulnerability by showing the reader what the character is feeling instead of simply telling them. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, consider subscribing and smashing that bell for more writing tips like this. I hope you have a ridiculously good day and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.